I've been gardening for more than 30 years and teaching gardening since 2004. And in all that time, I found that for most new gardeners, there's just so much information that isn't known yet that it can be a struggle. It's harder than it needs to be. Well, join me today as I share with you 10 tips, some good advice for new gardeners, and maybe for some old gardeners too. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I love gardening. And I have met hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who also call themselves gardeners and love gardening as well. And so the first tip is to think about gardening as a long-term venture. If you're just starting out, if you're just dipping your toe in the gardening water, well, be ready that the bug is going to bite you and you're going to be gardening for the rest of your life. Like me, I've been doing this for decades and I anticipate doing it for many decades more. And so too often gardeners, especially new gardeners, just think about this season. What seeds am I going to plant this season? What plants am I going to grow this season? What harvest can I look forward to this season? And I suggest you look at it from not just this season, but next season and the season after, because that will influence the beds that you're putting in place. It might influence the type of plants you're going to grow because maybe you want to save seeds for those future years. It will definitely influence the kind of knowledge that you need to develop. I think soil is key to gardening success. Well, if you just look at this season without really anticipating what your soil needs for the future and how you can build your soil to make it better, you're really losing out on future success. And soil is just one thing that you should really have a long-term approach for. So whether you're a new gardener or an old gardener, start thinking beyond just this year. And once you start developing that vision, well, the passion develops and becomes even stronger. I look around my garden. I've got a 5-year plan in place. I'm in the second year of that 5-year plan. And as I approach the third and fourth year, I'm already starting to develop the next 5-year plan. Gardening really is a long-term venture. And with an eye on the future and the long-term aspect of gardening, I suggest that you take your time when getting started. Make sure you're choosing the best location for your beds, for your garden, and for the plants within those beds. I just moved to this house a little under 2 years ago, and I spent most of the first year just observing, just watching the weather patterns, the animals, seeing what happens when it rains. Does it flood? Does it run off? What kind of pests show up in this space? I spent months before putting in a single bed. And when I put in that bed, I made sure it was in full sun, as with all the other beds. I took the time to figure out where my garden needed to be, and then what the components are going to be within that garden. And as part of that future plan, as I put all these pieces in place, now I can see, oh, there's a spot over there that I can put a bed, and there's an area over there where I can put some more flowers. It's an evolving process, this love of gardening. And if you take the time and start slow and get it right in the beginning, you'll have much better success as you learn and as you grow and as you expand your space. This next piece of advice is to grow what you want. Sure, you can take inputs from your family and your friends, and you can watch videos for ideas about what you can grow. But ultimately, you decide what you want to grow. Don't be influenced by somebody on YouTube that tells you what you should grow. Grow what you want to grow. I have about 150 garlic plants in this bed right here. Am I going to be able to use 150 bulbs of garlic? Well, it's not likely. There's way more here than I need. But you know what? I wanted to grow about 14 different types of garlic. And I wanted to see what did best in this bed. So I did it. That's what I wanted to do. If I would have listened to advice of others, they would have said, oh, that's way too much garlic. You'll never be able to use it. Don't grow that much. Just grow a few things that you can actually use. Well, you know what? I like my garlic. I like growing it. And when it's harvested, I'm probably going to like giving it away or figuring out new ways to preserve it. And this holds true throughout my garden. I'm just growing so many vegetables that it doesn't matter whether I can eat them or not. I can find somebody to give them to, but I just love growing the vegetables. I have over 100 tomato seedlings in my basement and over 100 pepper seedlings in my basement. That's way more than I can fit even in a garden this size. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's what I wanted to do, and I chose that as an option in the spring to get my gardening juices flowing. I've already started lining up the people I'm going to give the plants away to. That's a wonderful thing about gardening. But I don't want to feel limited. I want to keep myself happy with gardening, and growing plants makes me happy. To give yourself a little bit of that happiness, grow what you want to do. And don't feel like you should be limited because somebody tells you that you can't do what you want. Now, I understand that as a new gardener, you may not really know yet what you want to grow. So I'll offer some suggestions. Go ahead and choose some plants that really give you a big bang for your buck. Grow something that is expensive in the supermarket, but cheap to grow in the garden. A good example of this is fresh herbs. If you buy fresh herbs at the store, they can be quite expensive, but they're so easy to grow in the garden. You can just come out and snip some leaves and use them fresh and save yourself a ton of money. This is a salad bed that I'm growing right now. I eat a lot of salad. Well, rather than going to the store and buying all those individual pieces I like to put in a good salad, I can come out here and pull some daikon radish and clip off some endive. There's some mustard and a mesclun lettuce mix. I've got everything I need to make a nice salad in this bed. It saves me from having to run to the store. I used to grow a lot of green beans. I'm not a big green bean fan, but my wife and my daughter loved my pickled green beans that I would make at the end of the season. I got a lot of bang for the buck for those green beans. Sure, they're cheap in the supermarket, but knowing that my family liked something that I was growing and then preserving not only gave me satisfaction, but gave them satisfaction. So choose some plants that will really give you and others satisfaction. And it might be satisfaction in the pocketbook. It might be satisfaction at the dinner table. There's a few ideas of what you might want to grow. And as you continue your gardening journey, try to get in the habit of growing more than one plant, more than one variety of a particular type of plant. You probably wouldn't grow one bean plant because you're only going to get a handful of beans from it. You want to grow a bunch of bean plants, so you have a whole bunch of beans. Well, that idea holds true throughout the rest of your landscape as well. I have a currant bush right there and a currant bush right here. And I've got 4 currant bushes over there. Sure, I could grow a single currant bush, but by growing multiple varieties of the same type of plant, well, the pollination between those fruiting plants really is improved. And also, by having one type over there and a different type here and a different type here, I can really learn to appreciate what it is I like about currants, black currants and red currants. And I'm doing the same with raspberries back there. I've got 2 different varieties of raspberries and multiple plants of each. I've got a whole bed of asparagus here and a whole bed of asparagus there. It's so much more enjoyable to have abundance in your plants, especially when you get to the point that you find something you really like. By limiting yourself to a single plant, I think you're really limiting your gardening experience. So get out there and try new things and try a whole bunch of new things when it comes to the plants that you're putting in the ground. One of the hardest lessons that I've learned in my gardening experience is that it's okay to kill plants. This is so hard because that's what we're trying to do. We're putting seeds in, we're putting transplants in because we want our plants to live. And then to learn that it's okay to intentionally kill the plants, it kind of tugs at the heart a little bit. But often the plants left behind will do better. And so it can start with thinning. When you start a carrot row and you put your little seeds in, you're going to have a lot of carrots. And if you leave them all in place, they're probably going to be growing too close together and you won't get good carrots. But if you learn to thin them out so that there's enough space for the remaining plants to grow, well, then you'll have great carrots. And that holds true for most plants. When they have the space they need to grow, they'll do better. And that often means that you have to kill some plants to give the others the space they need. And even with the bigger fruit bushes and trees, you may find that you're growing a fruit tree and it's just not doing well. It's suffering. It might be diseased. Too many of us just want to try to nurse the tree along, try to do everything we can to heal it. And sometimes you just can't. You have to learn that you might have to kill plants, including trees, for the best benefit of your entire garden. It's a tough lesson, and it takes a long time to learn, and even after having learned it, I still have a hard time with it. But I know that the remaining plants that are left behind will be stronger and give me more of what I'm looking for. As I said earlier, I think soil is key to having a successful garden. And one of the best things you can do for your soil is amend it with compost. And you can make your own compost. And I highly suggest that you do so. All you do is take all the garden waste and kitchen waste and put it into a big pile. I've got a 2-bin system, but you don't need anything even this fancy. Just start stacking all of that organic material into a pile. All of those plants that you're killing so that the others become stronger, throw it in a compost pile. I look at my pile and I see avocado skins and lime wedges. We had tacos a couple days ago. We didn't throw anything away. It came out here. I see banana peels and some old radishes and some tips of squash. It all comes out here. It's so easy to do. It will break down, decompose, you add it to your soil, and your plants will love it. If you can do 2 systems, well, as this one is growing and then starting to decompose, I just start another one right next to it. I think every garden should have a compost pile. You don't have to go crazy with learning about the greens and the browns and the nitrogens and the carbons. You can just start by throwing organic waste in a pile and let nature do the rest. And in the process, you'll become a better gardener. And we can use that same mindset throughout the garden. We're using kitchen scraps to make compost. Well, why not reuse and recycle everything else you can find in your landscape? These old tree branches, well, they're now the border of this bed. This is a lasagna garden bed. It's made up of layers and layers of organic material, sheet composting, a lot like the bins, but I'm doing it right here, surrounded by reused tree branches. That compost setup, those pallets, well, they were free. They would have been thrown away. Well, I picked them up and put them into play as a compost bin system. There are so many other things you can find to use in your garden. I reuse milk jugs. I reuse everything organic that I can find. There's so many things that you might purchase, use them, and then you're in the habit of throwing it away. Well, take a second. Watch YouTube videos for ideas and find out how you can reuse and recycle a lot of that trash that would otherwise fill up a landfill. And I feel so much better when I can reuse what I already have and know that I'm keeping the planet a little bit healthier because of my actions. I suggest you keep track of everything you do as you're moving through this gardening journey as well. I strongly advocate having a gardening journal. It doesn't matter whether it's electronic or old school pen and paper, but just some method so you can keep track of what happens, what things you learn during a gardening season, and particularly learn to label your beds. For every row or couple rows of seeds I put in place, I make sure I have a plant label. It doesn't do much good if I'm growing a Mizuna mustard and I find out that this plant is great, when at the end of the season I forget what it was I put here. So label everything and then keep track of how well it does. Keep track of your weather. Keep track of your expenses. Keep track of every aspect of gardening. And then at the end of the season, when it's cold and windy and you're reviewing the successes that you've had, you've got a record of it. And then you can, once again, look to the future. Build upon those successes. It's easier to build when you've been keeping track of everything along the way, including the failures, because I've learned so much from the failures I've made. I've repeated some of them, and usually the ones that I've repeated were the ones that I didn't write down. So document everything, and you'll have much better success. Another thing I think new gardeners should hear, along with old gardeners, is don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try something new, to try something different. A new plant, a different way of doing things. Don't feel like you have to follow a particular way of doing things because you saw a video that suggested that as the best way to do things. If you're trying something and you think that there's a better way to do it, well then do it the way that you think is better. Do things as you want to do them, as you like to do them, and along the way you'll develop your own way of gardening. It may not match anybody else, but if it works for you, then it's the right way to do it. I blend many different types of gardening methods within my garden. I wouldn't say I'm following any particular way more than the other because I try a little bit of no-till gardening and a little bit of no-dig gardening. I do a little bit of Ruth Stout gardening and a little bit of lasagna gardening. I do a little bit of back to Eden gardening, and I do a little bit of just the Gardner Scott method of gardening, which is the compilation of all of the others. That's what works best for me. So figure out what works best for you, and that's the way that you should approach gardening. Sure, look at my videos and the other videos out there to get started and to figure out how a method can teach you to put seeds in the ground and start growing. But as you move through your gardening life, try something new. Do things a little bit different from this season to last season, and you'll end up a better gardener at the end. And after 30 plus years, you'll be able to tell others about your experiences all along the way. And a bonus thing that you should think about as a new gardener is to have fun. Enjoy it. It shouldn't be so much work that you don't want to do it again. If it becomes a chore, well, then I think maybe you're doing it wrong. And that's another reason to try something different so that you can find a way that keeps it fun, keeps it enjoyable, and keeps you moving towards that path of gardening becoming a true passion. And if you want to learn some of those ways to do things, you can watch some of my videos, including some of these right here. I'm Gardner Scott. Enjoy gardening.